Well, hello and happy new year. And thanks for joining me for 2026, The Friday Reporter. Today's conversation is with Tom Sietsema, who was for the last 25 years the food critic for the Washington Post. I am so excited to share this conversation with you, and I can't wait to get into it. So let's get going. Tom, let me start by saying I am so excited that you are a guest today, because I have been living in Washington for, well, over 20 years, and you have been a very constant and steady man behind the scenes when it comes to recommendations on where we're going and what we're doing in terms of our socializing, right? So
I will take that. Constant and steady are attributes
in a good way.
that I strive for, And I think when you're in a job as long as I have been, you also want to mix it up too. But I think consistency is one of the hardest things in restaurants, and consistency is one of the hardest things for journalists too. Everyone has to work on it.
Well, I'm fascinated by this entire career that you have had. I know that you spent some time before you were at the Post working and doing some critic work beyond that. You have been a guest. You've had bylines at lots of the biggest publications on the globe. I want to know, though, how did you get into this line of work?
Well, I don't think anyone aspires when they're 5 years old to be a food critic, right? But I did grow up in a home where food was valued, where we spent a lot of time in the kitchen. My mom and my grandmother were great cooks. My parents both encouraged us to travel and to eat well while we traveled. I'm just a farm kid from Minnesota, basically, right? So, and very middle class, but we were the family that bought the whole encyclopedia and thought it was really important, thought travel and good food were part of that and part of a good upbringing, I guess. I ended up, I graduated from the School of Georgetown at here in Washington, and I had a couple media internships that really changed my life. I worked for ABC News as a gopher, and I worked for the Chicago Sun-Times, where I got to help cover the Reagan assassination attempt. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I was going to skip going to work that day, but I went. And what I realized, the long and the short of it is, what I realized, like journalism, although I had thought about going into diplomacy or working for government, what I realized was like, wow, there are people out there who get paid to ask people questions, and you can dip out of these various lives and situations. How cool is that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I ended up getting a job as a copy aide at the Washington Post. I was in Georgetown's very first journalism class. My classmate was Kara Swisher.
No kidding.
And we are still friends. Mm. And after that, the professor said, hey, I like you. If I can help you out, let me know. And he helped me get a job as a copy aide at the Washington Post. And you know how this works. You will do anything to get out of these jobs, right? So you apply for all sorts of jobs for which you're not qualified. And one week, Bob Woodward was looking for an assistant, as was my legendary predecessor, Phyllis Richmond, who had the job for almost 24 years. And I applied for both. I interviewed with both. I was nervous with both of them. And I got a lovely thanks but no thanks from Bob Woodward, and a lovely note of encouragement for Phyllis. She said, I like you. Let's work together. Let's see how this goes. So from the get-go, I was helping her research stories. I was making all her restaurant reservations, and she had this raft of famous friends. So you'd pick it up and it'd be Barney Frank or someone from NPR or Roger Mudd, and it was quite intimidating. In fact, I called for Mrs. Richmond for the first month I was there, and she goes, stop, call me Phyllis. She was very real, and I always appreciated that. But it was the big leagues, right?
Yeah.
And one of my jobs was to test the bulk of the recipes for the food section, and we had 2 food sections back in the early 80s, and so I tested over 1,000 recipes. All genres. She would go to England and bring back 20 recipes using Stilton cheese that she was writing about, right? Mm. And I was making virtually no money, but spending a small fortune in groceries, for which I was reimbursed. But that was sort of my training. It was like, okay, Tom makes a recipe with these instructions, and I would have the questions a normal reader would have. Subsequently, when I traveled, I would take cooking classes and I took random cooking classes here and there. But, I never went to I was never in any formal culinary training whatsoever. I do think in these jobs, writing is pretty important. You either have to be really good at what you do, like the cooking food aspect of it, or you have to be like a fairly engaging writer. And I think I had early writing chops, but I learned about food. I learned how things go together. And that was invaluable, for me later on, certainly, as I went
Yeah.
around the country and worked for other newspapers and then came back and followed my successor in 2000.
Washington, D.C., over the 25 years that you have been here, has had, I mean, I would say, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, has really had a renaissance as it relates to
Absolutely.
food.
Absolutely. I do think the one thing that people get wrong, people have long um, uh, thought of DC as a steakhouse town, and that has been true in certain years, and we're seeing another renaissance of that. It's like all French all the time. The pendulum swings. It's like anything else. Um, I think one reason we are known for being a steakhouse town or having steaks among all the many other genres of cuisine we have in a world capital is because so much entertaining is done here, and there's so much diplomacy and so much thought about like you don't want to offend people with a meal, and I think a large number of people around the world can understand and get around a piece of grilled meat
Hmm.
for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Also, steakhouses often embody the idea of this is important, this is corporate, we value you, it's upscale, in a way that other restaurants might not.
Mhm.
But I remember back when I was a kid, like in the 80s, we had a raft of very distinguished female chefs in this city. People forget those things. We've always had really good, inexpensive food.
Mhm.
Credit to all the schools that exist here, all the colleges that exist here, and people on government salaries that exist here. And we've always had good food at the top end, the expense account level, because hello, lobbyists and government and official entertaining and everything. What the big change on my watch has been this amazing growth in those middle tier places, the places that you would go to on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday when you don't feel like cooking, like the neighborhood places, right? That are
Mhm.
serious neighborhood places, not just burgers and fries, but composed dishes that you wouldn't necessarily make at home for yourself, right? And
Mhm.
that has been the biggest change food wise. And of course, social media has changed everything we do uh, completely, you
No
know.
question about it. Uh, you talk at some level about some of the ways that you got around being noticed over
Yeah.
the course of your career, and one of
Or not
them,
noticed.
or not noticed for that matter.
Right.
Uh, and some of those, one of the things that you said was or have said is that the badge, the Washington D.C. the convention badge was a tactic that you employed over time.
It
Tell
was
me
the
a little
best.
bit about, yeah.
Well, you think there are only so many things that men in particular can do. I've had a bunch of bad toupees over the years. I have facial hair, and you can wear like padded, like clothes that aren't particularly my style, padding to make you look heavier than you are. There are those things, but all that stuff takes a lot of time. And at the end of the day, I would rather spend time eating in restaurants and writing about them than thinking like how I'm going to make myself not look like myself, right?
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
I did make an effort to go in all the top restaurants to see how I was treated as a regular diner, right?
Mhm.
And one thing that I found and used a fair amount was the convention badge.
Mhm.
And people do not even look at your face, they just look at who you're with, right? And I would change the name, and sometimes it would be German or maybe someone from Europe or whatever, right? And they would just look at the badge and not your face. It's sort of like when a baby starts crying and then you ring a little bell or like shiny bauble or something to distract them. A lot of restaurateurs did that, and it was amazing. I also had a set of bad teeth that I used
I
too.
had heard this.
And I love that. because it was super effective. And I wore that with a toupee one time. I scared even my dining companion who knew me for a long time. I met her down in the parking garage before we went up to the restaurant. And she goes, "Oh my God, you are scaring me." Right. The problem with that was, highly effective as it was, I had to take the teeth out in order
Mm,
to chew. Right.
mm.
And I ended up putting it in my napkin, chewing a little bit, putting the teeth back. And it was such a production. Like, I went home starving that night, tasting very little of the food just because it was such an ordeal. I should have practiced that one before I went out in public, but it did work. They didn't know I
Did
was
you
there.
did you often dine alone? Did you dine with a group? How did that, how did you approach that? Did you have a bit of a formula that you followed?
Yeah, well, I was really lucky in that the Post financed, and they put a lot of money into it. Eating out, as you know, is really expensive. I would
Mhm.
go at least 3 times to restaurants. And at least on one of those visits, I like to go alone. And I often gravitated toward the bar
Mm,
because while you can't eat as much as when you're with three or more people, you do get to sort of hone in on the details, like, what is the color of the walls again, or what artwork are they showing, or what is the soundtrack that they play a lot of. And then sitting in the bar, you also get to hear from your fellow diners, and you get to hear maybe a little gossip from the bartender, so you get a wealth of information there. And it's also for fact checking purposes. If I thought the chicken was really dry the first time I went there, I might go back by myself to try it again, like to check for consistency. But I also
mm.
think there are a lot of single people in Washington, a
Yes.
lot, right? And I wanted to honor them with that too. How does a single person get treated?
Mhm.
And women, female readers always complain like, "Oh, you have no idea what it's like to be us." And so often I would go with another woman, and I would have her go to the restaurant first and be seated and
Mm,
see where she was seated, right?
mhm.
And sometimes it was a good table, and sometimes it was, by the swinging kitchen doors. It just depended, right?
Interesting.
But I thought that was interesting. I did pay attention to how different groups felt that they were treated. I thought that was very important, and I would send those people, those demographics, in ahead of me, so it wasn't, white male guy of a certain vintage coming in and perhaps getting a better table.
Is there any particular review that stands out for you that was one that you felt like
Mm.
is memorable or is one that you like to reflect back on?
Yeah, well, there are probably three. I'll go through them quickly. One is Funding
Sure.
Farmers because it got
Mhm.
so much attention. It was the first 0-star review that I think I had written about, and it was all about location, location, location. I went 7 times because I wanted to be super thorough in
Mm,
my reporting. I could not afford to get anything wrong in that review, right?
right.
And it was really pretty much a disaster.
Mm,
And subsequently, before I left, I did go back and I upgraded it a little bit. But I felt like I was kind of an investigative reporter on that. The
mm,
one that I felt was super important to me was right ahead of COVID. I reviewed the Miriam's Kitchen down in
mm,
Foggy Bottom. And I thought it was
mhm.
really important to remember that not all of us have the privilege of eating out in restaurants, and
Yes.
people need to be fed. And that to me was so meaningful. And I went, I joined the food line every day for breakfast. Um, for 3 meals like I would with a public restaurant. And I saw the dignity with which the volunteers fed and served the mostly men, but some
Mhm,
women,
mhm.
um, who didn't have enough to eat, who had no homes, right?
Right. Right.
And the thing that not only were they treated with dignity, but the food was all restaurant quality. I mean,
Yeah.
things made from scratch. I was so impressed with that. And that meant
Mm,
a lot to me, I think, because um, I want food to be a little bit more democratic. I want people to think of food in all ways, not just, dining in nice restaurants, right?
right. Yeah.
And I guess the one I'm super proud of is I'm the first food critic to have reviewed the restaurant at the CIA.
Mhm.
And it's all because I went to a party and this young couple who didn't talk much about their job, which is very unusual in Washington. I
Yeah,
kept
no doubt.
probing them, and I finally found out that they worked for the company. And they said,
Mm.
"Have you ever reviewed the food there?" I said, "No, tell me more." He said, "Well, there's a restaurant on the top and anyone can go there.
Oh, no
It's
kidding.
reservations are really hard,
Mm.
because it's a 30 or 40 seat place." And I learned so much about intelligence in this country because I had to park like a mile away and then I had to be escorted in. I had to give up, I had to give up all my electronics, and I felt naked going in there because I couldn't have a watch. I couldn't have, I could bring a notebook and a pen, but that was kind of the extent,
Mm.
right? Because you couldn't have anything that would record anything.
And you
And I
pay in
felt like,
cash, is that right?
yeah, I paid in cash
Yeah.
because you realize no one could use like a real credit card because
Mm.
so many people were undercover there,
No
right?
kidding.
And
Yeah.
so it's all cash. And the food, I will say, I've eaten at the White House Mess, I've eaten at the Pentagon, and I think the food at the Central Intelligence Agency is some of the best government food I've had in my 26 years of eating in cafeterias and everything. I thought,
No
and
kidding.
good for them because you're sort of, there aren't a lot of choices, and it takes a little time to get in and out of the CIA if you're a worker bee there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully the food options are good. And again, there were cafeterias and fast food places downstairs, but the restaurant there was a real privilege to review. It was really fun.
Did
And the
they
view
know
is
you were
fantastic.
did they know you were coming?
Oh, absolutely. They had to
Yeah.
know. They had to know. So I kept that in mind, right? But
Yeah.
but they can't really change the whole menu at that point. I mean,
Right.
I ordered off the menu and what it was, and my dining companions were 8 people who worked for the company, and they all graciously let me sample their sandwiches and soups and things that we had. There was no alcohol, and I don't recall, were we able to tip? I don't remember. But anyway, yeah, we did pay in cash. I do remember, and I kept my receipt too,
How about that?
which is really fun. I like that
So when you
that assignment a lot.
I mean, all of those are so great, and I think they're a really nice, um, way to demonstrate sort of the depth of the work that you did in those 25 years. But there also was an incredible amount of work that was done each year on the dining guide.
Mm,
That project alone, to me,
yeah.
seems just incredibly daunting. And you're careful to remember when you did it over those years, all of the different neighborhoods. Because Washington, D.C., as much as it's considered, the city, there are so many communities around the city that are also
Mhm,
so important in that
mhm.
demographic of restaurants.
Well, we have readers everywhere, right? And I thought it was, I will say, people in Virginia thought we spent too much time on the city. People in Maryland
Naturally.
always felt like, you never write about us. You always stay at home. You always eat close to home. And the fact of the matter is, most dining guides are celebrations of what's good. And I happen to find, I mean, look, the city is going to attract really good restaurants and star chefs and things like that. What did change, though, is I think Northern Virginia is such a good place to eat now. And you don't have to go downtown to have a really exceptional meal at
Mm,
any price level. I
right.
mean, if I lived in Northern Virginia, I would be very inclined to stay at home. The options are many and rich and varied, and at price points that a lot of people can relate to.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's why we stay in Northern Virginia, and my house is very happy to be here. Would
Sure,
you
and then you think about
say
the city, with the traffic and with what's gone
Yeah,
on, especially in the last year or something with ice raids and people reading about this. Like, who wants to deal with that?
right.
It's so much
That's right.
easier to eat closer to home, I think.
Absolutely. 2 questions. Number 1, if you're going out to dinner
Mhm,
during the week,
mhm.
is there a local haunt? Is there a place that you find is a go-to for you? And
Yeah. I mean, there are
that's
2.
probably a hard question. Are
I would
there?
go to Chicatana on 14th Street for really good, serious Mexican, that won't break the bank, and I would go to Bon May, which is fabulous Laotian from a chef who grew up in a Thai refugee camp.
Oh,
Um or came here via a Thai refugee camp, and her
Mm,
name is Sang Luang Grath. I think
mm.
those are real restaurants that are affordable and delicious, and speak to how well we can eat in this city. We are, in fact, a world-class city when it comes to a lot of things, food included.
Well, after 25 years of eating out, though, you have got to be looking forward to eating at home, especially because it strikes me that you yourself probably are, because of your background, also very interested in creating at home in your house. What are you cooking these days?
Well, I think I've had a lifetime of. It's not short. Whoops. I am so sorry.
That's okay.
I've had a lifetime of fancy food. And so what I'm really interested in is like the basics and doing the basics well. So in the last week or so, I've had meatloaf. I
Mm,
used the recipe from Quaker Oats. I used a cup of oats or so.
no
I
kidding.
make roast chicken in a paper bag. I'm experimenting with that. And I will be writing about that at some point. I get crab cakes from Fadley's in Baltimore. You can get
Mm,
them yourself at Lexington Market, or you can get them through Goldbelly or other food delivery platforms. And they are, to me, the best crab cakes on the market. So I cook kind of simply, but I also look at my refrigerator now as a challenge. I'll take restaurant leftovers and, make a hash or I love making meals out of leftovers too.
mm.
And my partner gets a little tired of it, I think, sometimes, but I find them delicious. And it's nothing that a spritz of lemon juice or a hit of vinegar or some sriracha won't improve on.
I love it. Okay, so tell me a little bit though, Tom, because I know that this is the end of one chapter, but there are many chapters to go. What's next for you?
Well, you never know I've had so many really fun offers to do things, including TV. And I love being on this podcast because I can finally show my face. Yay.
Yeah, I do
That
too.
really helps. And I do have plans. Most immediately, what I'm doing is I'm having Lamburger nights in my home where I bring six or so people from different backgrounds together just to share their stories and find a little more joy and meaning in life by meeting different people.
Mm,
I make Lamburgers, a simple salad, a really good dessert, and hopefully people go home having met some cool new people and sated. Right.
love it.
I wanted to expand on that because I moved from a big house to a smaller apartment as I left the post. And so I'm doing once a month restaurant meals. I call them just because
Mm,
there's no agenda other than for interesting people to meet interesting people. And I'm personally paying for this in restaurants. And our first one is coming up next week. And I've got 8 really fun people put together. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I will be continuing to do that before I launch my newsletter. And it's going to be a food, travel, entertaining newsletter, Next Course by Tom Sietsema, which I'm
love it.
excited to launch sometime in spring. I don't want to
Okay.
be, I'd like it to be March, but I don't want to say that publicly, but hopefully by March.
That's
Yeah.
aspirational. That's fair.
Aspirational. Yeah. It's a lot of work.
And folks can find you at tomsietsema.com.
Correct.
Okay.
There's a way
Good,
to
good.
contact me there and to look at some of my past work and where I've been.
I love it. What one of the questions I always ask at the end of every conversation is for a recommendation for a future guest for the Friday Reporter. Is there
Yeah.
someone you think I should talk to?
There is. Her name is Anthea Hardig. She heads up the Smithsonian's American History Museum, and she has been a dining companion of mine.
Mm,
We've had broken dinner together, and I think she's one of the most fascinating people I know in Washington. I think she's the first female head of that museum too. But
awesome.
she has access to all the cool stuff. She has great stories. She cares deeply about history and getting it right. And I would love to see her on this show and hear what she has to say.
Fantastic. That's a great recommendation. I'm going to reach out to her. I'm going to tell her you
Sure.
nominated her.
I
And
have the number.
Tom, I am so thrilled to have had you as a guest today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for asking me. This has been such a treat. I feel like we've had cocktails together.
Thanks for joining me. That was super fun. I'm looking forward to a really busy and exciting 2026. Big thanks to my production team at Two River Pictures. And another really important thanks to my friends at Be the Brand Collective who helped me with marketing and making sure the word gets out about the show. I'll see you again for another episode. Thanks so much.